Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are going to be finishing our all black version of the Big Bertha from, I don't know, like 20 years ago. It's still an interesting build. Um, Here's the finished, well, almost finished version. You obviously can't see it because it's big. It's Big Bertha, right? Fins look pretty good. I am pretty happy with the general reduction in grain, although you probably can't see terribly well. Doing all that processing has made them quite smooth, and the grain is not terribly noticeable. There's some kind of odd funkiness here in this section and that section with regard to how I sanded it, but overall it looks pretty nice. One thing, however, that I might consider if I were to build this one again is, and you could probably see it if you were looking carefully, is that the spiral in the tube is surprisingly noticeable. This happens from time to time. It is not unavoidable, but the way to deal with it is the same way we dealt with the grain in the balsa, which would be to use wood fill and sanding sealer and primer and all that stuff and sand down, fill in, and then sand down all the spiral. Honestly, I don't recall the last time I bothered to do that. And there are two reasons. One is it's annoying, and two is frequently I'm going to cover up a lot of this with decals. And that's kind of what's going to happen in this one. So, decals. Yeah, the decals in this kit are unfortunately stickers. And they didn't come in a like pre-cut sticker page either. They came in a big sticker sheet that was all stuck together like this. You can't stick your fingernail under here. It's not pre-cut. So that means that all these decals I have already cut out of the big sheet. This was really annoying, like really, really annoying. And it's not something you see in most modern kits. So again, if you are better with a hobby knife than I am, that might be the preferred tool, but I have a pretty sharp pair of scissors and it does the job for me. The trick to this is, and I have to like tell my brain to do this because I'm used to doing the exact opposite, is the rocket's black, the decals are black. I actually want to cut just inside of the color part because if I cut just outside like I normally would, there's going to be a little bit of white outline and that would be ugly. So we're going to try to avoid that. So I am carefully just snipping along the outside here, and notice too that the corners of this are not actually corners, they're rounded. So I have to go around the rounded part with my scissors as well, which by the way would be, I think, is kind of like the deal breaker on doing this with a hobby knife. I am much better at taking corners, rounded corners with scissors than I am with a hobby knife. So carefully just trying to stay ever so slightly inside the colored part of the decal, which again is making my brain say, what is wrong with you? Don't do that. That's not how you handle decals. But in this case, it is because I do not want any of the white backing paper to stick out. So anyway, there we go. All these are now cut out. So to apply them, well, there are two big sections that say Big Bertha, and they are going to go down here around just above the fins. And just to kind of like lay things out in my brain how I want them to be, actually in looking at that, I can see there's a little bit of white sticking out here. So I'm going to kind of trim that off like so. There we go. So in any event, the decals are going to kind of lay like this. So I kind of want them evenly spaced around the launch lug. The launch lug is kind of my reference point here. And in feeling on the other side, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to try to give myself like a 1/4 of an inch standoff from the launch lug. And I'm going to use the launch lug as a reference point to get the decal applied accurately. So now it's time to actually take the decal off, which is probably not going to be super easy either. Kind of let my fingernails grow so I could help. It could be useful in prying this off, because otherwise, good luck to you. This is not a particularly easy process, which is why most, if you have there we go, self-sticking stickers, self-adhering stickers, I guess I should say, they are usually trimmed out at this point. Now, there's a bit of dust on here. I'm going to try to get that off so I don't have anything underneath the decal. And again, self-sticking decals means you don't have a lot of leeway in getting this right. You kind of have one really good shot at it and then maybe 2 or 3 more decent shots, and then from there it's all downhill. So I have put the base on here, and I'm just going to kind of roll it onto the tube, and I'm going to try not to get any giant air bubbles in the process. All right, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to work my way up toward the edge, smoothing as I go. Same deal in this direction. And that looks pretty good. All right, so let's do the other side. Same basic process. I need to get my finger underneath the decal again. This one actually came off kind of nicely. That's good. And you'll notice that I lined this part up with the end of the launch lug, so I'm going to make sure that I do that again so that they are essentially in the same place. And I'm going to try to get the distance that I had it from the launch lug to be approximately the same too, although I suppose that's not as important because I know, because I test fit it, that they're not going to overlap each other if I don't do a great job. All right, so on this goes. And you can see that there is a decent amount of gap in between, so that's good. It seems to be largely straight, and I am just going to smooth it out. And smooth. Ooh, that made an awful sound. Okay, so the distance between these, this one's a little higher up. Honestly, I'm pretty pleased with that. I think that went fairly well. The other ones, so there are, these two go at the top. I'm going to do that off camera because you don't need to watch me apply all these decals. But the thin ones, these ones, let's go back to the way it was oriented to begin with. These are going to go like this. And you'll notice that there are 4 of them. Yeah, Estes does this a decent amount. They still do. It would be nice if there were 8 because there are 8 faces to the 4 fins, but that's just not how this is going to work. So we're going to have to just kind of pick and choose which sides we use. And if I do it like that, it's upside down, so that's not what I want. I guess, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about how I want that. But I mean, this side is exactly what I want because the lettering is facing in toward the middle of the tube. I mean, that's okay. I guess this is how I'm going to end up doing it because I don't really see any other options. But in any event, I'm going to have those 2 and one here. And this is obviously going to fall when I rotate it back, but one on this side as well. So there's going to be kind of like a, this is the good face where you can see all the decals. That's about as best you can do when you only have 4 decals for 8 faces. So I'm not going to, again, I'm not going to apply all these right now. I think I'll apply this one. And then the rest, they can get done off camera. So let's try to peel off the backing. That went pretty well this time. I'm going to start at the back, kind of. You know, I'm going to get my distance from the back, and then I'm going to try to line it up with the shape of the fin. So that's actually a little too far back. So the more times you peel it off, the less stickiness there is. So you don't want to do this more times than are necessary. And that looks pretty good. It's not perfectly where I wanted it to be, but overall it is pretty close. And I have some like dust on my hand. I hope that didn't get in between the paint and the sticker. All right. So there are 5 more of these to do. You do not need to watch me do them. However, I will get them done. And yeah, this is why you should really keep a tidier workspace than mine. The paint on this is dry, but it's not like 100% dry. So if I leave any of this dust on here, it will stay permanently. And I don't want that. So there, I'm going to try to find a cleaner spot when I put the rest of these on. Anyway, so more decals to be done off camera, and then we have some last minute additions that will be done. Well, we got to put the recovery system in. That'll be after the decals. So stay tuned. Okay, so decals, they are applied for better or for worse. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with them. One of the things that is annoying about doing the ones on the fins is that frequently they're designed to fit the fin perfectly if you haven't shaped it, like if you haven't airfoiled it. Well, I didn't airfoil, but I just rounded them, and still, even rounding them takes some of the surface off and can make the decals not line up just quite right. So mine aren't perfect. They are good enough. And yeah, the ones at the top, this section is supposed to generally line up with that. I eyeballed it because I really did not want to take the time to do it any more accurately than that. So this is going to be as good as it gets. I actually put a little nick in it there. So this is kind of annoying if you get a little nick in your paint job, but you know how you fix it? This is black. So is this. So I'm just going to color it in with a Sharpie. And while you could see it if you were really looking, it's better than having that very obvious little white spot sticking out. So there you go. All right, so this is going to go out of the way for a moment. The last thing we need to do is deal with the recovery system. So here we've got a parachute. This is an old Estes one, remember, because this is very old stock at this point. Because you can't buy one of these all black Big Berthas anymore. So a couple little issues that may come up here. Some of them, they aren't even fully assembled. And that does not seem to be the case here. So that's good. They all are, the little paper retainer things are all in chute. The thread, however, is also 20 years old at this point. So I suspect that it is not as durable as it could be. Unfortunately, short of just kind of like tugging on it and seeing if anything rips, I don't think that there's a particularly good way to go about testing the tensile strength of this stuff right now. So we're just going to have to kind of hope and pray that it doesn't fail catastrophically on our first flight. And if it does fail, hopefully it's only one shroud line and easy enough to replace. Also note that most of the Estes kits have two next to each other off camera over here. But this one and the one completely across from it are connected as well. This is not the case here. And, oops, the practical consequence to this is when you try to gather them up, you're going to end up with strings crossing. It's unavoidable. But it is what it is. A little bit of string crossing in the canopy isn't going to really make or break this rocket. It would be nice if that weren't the case, but not much we can do about it. So the usual business. And yeah, the thread in this is different from the ones that Estes uses more currently too. It is soft and supple and probably not as strong, which also makes it harder to kind of thread through stuff. So there we go. All right, so that's taken care of. That can go away. The last bit, the shock cord. While the 20-year-old cloth strings in the parachute will probably break at some point, I don't trust this stuff like at all. I'm not going to use this shock cord because it's really old and elastic does not hold up over time. And I mean, it doesn't feel terrible. It's not brittle, but I can't imagine that this can take too much abuse. So goodbye, off to the trash can. You could, of course, buy a new shock cord, but the alternative is to use this stuff. This is Kevlar thread. It is very thin. It is very durable. And in fact, if you remember our Trident model here, we actually used a bit of it in the construction because it is not flame proof, but it can take a lot more beating than elastic thread. So this stuff is nice. It's really strong. It'll definitely do the trick. And you can buy it in like spindles like this, which is what I have. So I am going to not be too precise, but I'm going to measure out approximately 4 feet of this stuff because, well, this is it's 100 feet of it, so I can spare. First of all, I can spare it, and second of all, um, it's hard to have too much shock cord. All right, so that's approximately 48 inches. Snip it off. And snipping this stuff can be kind of difficult, but that actually went pretty well, so I'm pleased. I kind of repackage it so it doesn't unwind in my storage box, which would be irritating. There we go. So off that goes. Now, if you recall when we did the Trident, if you watched that one, this stuff was actually threaded right into the motor mount. And that is a grand, glorious idea. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But we didn't do that. So we can still use the old Estes template approach. It's just a little bit trickier because the thread is smaller and it tends to be kind of wiggly. So I'm actually going to have to be a little more precise than usual with this. And it is stiffer also, so that can be kind of annoying. So I'm going to do my best to actually put some glue on the thread, or as opposed to just around the thread like frequently happens. And then it's the usual template here. A little bit of glue, fold it over, a bit more glue. 3 stripes ought to do. I'm putting one directly on top of the thread this time, and fold it over again. And like I said, this stuff is pretty thick, so it doesn't really love being folded over like that. But you know, it works. It's not like mithril or something. You know, it is very much deformable. It's thread, even though it is pretty tough thread. All right, so that is taken care of. It is now ready to be attached into the rocket itself. My hands are gluey, so I'm going to make sure that they are cleaned off a bit before I touch my definitely not gluey, mostly finished rocket here. Off comes the nose cone. And oops, get a little bit of glue on this. And then up it goes into the rocket body. Now, the elastic shock cord sometimes tends to help you get it where it should be, but this one, you can't see what I'm doing because the rocket's too tall. The cord is desperately trying not to go where I want it to go. So it is pushing itself in places where I don't want it, which is really annoying. Like now, it's flipped over entirely. That's what happens when you have a fairly stiff cord. So I finally got it basically where I want it to be, and then in goes my finger to push it out to hold it in place. And that should just about do it. All right. So, clasp from the parachute goes in here. Great. And then this part. Well, one downside to using this thread is that it doesn't tie as nicely as, say, the shock cord. The shock cord, being elastic, tends to grip itself. This stuff doesn't cooperate as well. And it's also, like I said, stiff, so it kind of fights you the whole way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do closer to a square knot here. This is not particularly good square knot, but yeah. It's also harder to tighten, especially because my hands are still kind of tacky with the glue. So I could probably get one more knot into this. And there. Okay. So it's sliding a lot, which I can live with, but I don't want the knot itself to slide apart. So get rid of that now. You can put a dab of this stuff in there. And in fact, that's probably what I'm going to do this time. Just a little bit, and kind of like brush it around on the knot. Basically, you're just trying to fill stuff in here, and the glue needs to set more or less to itself. It doesn't really need to set into the thread itself, because you're not trying to make like a binding permanent knot that's never ever going to come apart. You're just trying to discourage the knot from coming apart, like strongly discourage perhaps, but you can crazy glue it. And if this were a heavier rocket and something powered by like a larger size motor, a 24 millimeter motor, I would probably consider that. But I think that the wood glue is probably going to do a decent enough job here. So we'll let that set. Plus, there's glue inside the body tube anyway from where I attached the motor mount, or not the motor mount, the shock cord mount. So this is basically where we leave it. Once the glue is dried, it'll be packed up, and that's the end. This rocket is probably, I'm hoping it'll be a fun one to launch, because the bigger ones for their size tend to, the small ones just zip off the pad and you lose track of them. It kind of, it doesn't feel as real as a big rocket for whatever reason. Plus, we should be able to launch this one on our smaller field uh, with a C motor, which we don't get to do very often. So, something to look forward to. Hope you enjoyed this segment, and we'll have to find a new rocket to build next. I wonder what that will be. Thanks for watching. See you next time.